Welcome. I'm Karen Kelleher, Family Caregiver Support Coordinator for Daybreak. Thank you for attending this webinar today, and greetings to those who will be watching it in the future. For our presentation today, we feature 4 former caregivers whose loved ones are recently deceased. I've asked them to share their experiences of transitioning from caregiver to post-caregiving life. A significant part of this transition uh, consists of challenging and changing their perspective from we to me. That is to say that the most significant change confronting them is that of becoming an independent single person after losing their loved one. I want to sincerely thank our presenters today for sharing with us their deeply personal, life-changing experiences of loss, subsequent insights, and how life is for them now as a single person. I'm going to introduce our first caregiver, Gail. We're ready to hear from Gail.
Hello, my name is Gail Hudson, and I've been a member of Caring for the Caregiver since 2019. I found out about the group through the San Leandro Senior Center, and it has been a lifesaver. It has meant the world to me to be a part of this group. My husband was diagnosed with multiple system atrophy and Parkinson Lewy bodies when he was 80, and by the time he was 83, he required full-time caregiving. He died last year. Last July, and so I took care of him for 5 years around the clock, and I had some help through the VA's home health aid service. I would think that anybody who's approaching this process of being a caregiver really needs to belong to a caregiver support group, because Karen and Susan recommended me to so many different resources that I didn't know existed, and the biggest one being a social worker with the VA, and that changed a lot for me. During the time that I was caring for my husband, it was incremental grieving, because you lose the person that you loved. He's no longer the same person he was. His dementia wasn't that bad. It was more like sundowning, but there were so many things he no longer could do, so many things he didn't understand. And he was a very kind and cooperative man, so that made it easy for me. But at the same time, I could see his frustration and his worry, and it was just, it was a lot to experience. And he went into hospice January of last year, and within 6 months, he passed away. Because of the incremental grieving through the caregiver support group that I learned about, and the reframing was amazing. I went from being his wife to his caregiver to his nurse, and that really helped me adjust through the process. I was able to get him an autopsy through Stanford, which I recommend for anyone who doesn't really know the true diagnosis of their loved one's illness, because I wanted his family to know what they were facing genetically, what it might mean for them. And Stanford was able to definitely diagnose us at multiple system atrophy with Parkinson Lewy bodies. And I gave that information to the VA, and they were really pleased to have that diagnosis. And that is a free service through Stanford. He was an organ donor, so they took care of all that. And it was just a very, very smooth process. After his death, I wasn't quite prepared for all the things that I would have to do, but it went pretty smoothly. I had to update the trust. I had to do a cost up step basis for the house for tax purposes. And, that just took time, and it was a process to get through. And then I just found myself kind of flat without the structure, without knowing, without having that structure of being a daily caregiver so intensely over those years. I had to kind of reframe what I was doing for myself. So that has been the biggest hurdle these last months, was to figure out what I want now, because I'll be 72 this year, and I just, have a lot more years behind me than ahead of me, and I want these years to be good, and I want them to count. So I found out that what I really needed to do was a lot more structure, and I had to make more time for myself without saying yes to everything, when you're a caregiver, you're very isolated. And when you're no longer isolated, you find yourself wanting to get out and do things, but at the same time, you can overschedule yourself. And that was a problem for me for a while. And I've joined a Mastic, it's called Mastic Seniors in Alameda, which is a weekly walking group around the Bay Area. And I've taken some classes. I'm heavily involved in a political action group. I belong to a garden exchange that I started some years ago. And all these things are enriching without me feeling like I'm just always too busy. So I'm really trying to slow it down, to find structure, to do things that have purpose for me. And I eventually realized that some sadness was creeping in. And what it was not missing those caregiving years. That's really hard work. It's a hard process to go through, but I was missing the person that I knew before that I had lost. And now when I look around, I'm starting to let the good memories come in of all the fun things we did and the life we enjoyed together for 38 years. And that to me has really been a revelation that I could feel good about all that again instead of just missing him. I miss the times we spent together and the things we did together. But I'm now discovering that for myself, and I'm making new memories and spending a lot of time with loved ones and friends and activities that I really enjoy doing. I would never want to go through this without a caregiver support group. And I always tell people who are going through this to look into that for themselves. I have 4 friends right now who are going through the hospice of loved ones. And I keep telling them that you need a caregiver support group to get you through this. And it really helped me, I believe, with the grieving afterwards. And now what I'm learning is how to structure myself and how to move forward. And that is been a big challenge to figure all that out. But I think if you have a lot of interests and things that you enjoy doing, now is the time to explore them and really embrace your friends and your family and those people that you want to spend time with, because that can make all the difference in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Important thing about sharing their experiences is to see where do you fall after, and I don't mean physically, where do you fall after you're used to being a caregiver and caring for your loved one, and knowing that it's a terminal illness and that you will be saying goodbye at some point. Then when it happens, how are you? You know, who are you now? How are you? And what support do you need now? And it's really wonderful that each of our caregivers are willing to share their experience of this, because every story is unique, everyone is different, and yet you share something deeply significant in where you've been and where you are now. Pam, I'm going to ask you if you could share with us your experiences. Everyone, welcome Pam.
Well, it's been 4 years since my husband died. It'll be 4 years in August. And he died from vascular dementia. And you wonder, does the grief ever go away? It really doesn't. Everything in my home reminds me of my husband. We were married for almost 60 years and raised 4 children here. So there are lots of memories. Roy was retired when he started having dementia. He had been retired quite a while, and he was healthy, and he was enjoying classes and lunches with colleagues and taking walks and just family time together. He was happy in retirement. But then he started putting little Post-it notes on a mirror because he was starting to have trouble remembering things. So I didn't pick up on that. I just thought, oh, that's kind of a useful thing. I should be doing that. But it took me a while. I was in denial, but I eventually started to realize he was having more trouble. And over time, I took over more and more of his life, scheduling his activities as he lost more of himself. Eventually, he became just shadowed me wherever I went. Instead of being a wife and a partner, I was his caregiver, focused on having him maintain as much of himself as he possibly could for as long as he could. He would take the bus until he couldn't. He would go for long walks until he got lost, and I'd see on his Tracamo watch that he'd gone off on a wrong direction, so I'd get in the car and chase after him. Um, uh, in the end of it, he was walking between two telephone poles, and I'd have to remind him to turn around as he reached each telephone pole. Um, for a little while, he had a daycare program that he was part of, which was great because it went from 9 to 4, and I had 2 days to myself to do things, and it just was a break for me, and I think he had fun too. But then COVID hit, and everything changed. Zoom became a thing, and it was a great social outlet, actually. I could isolate myself at home with Roy. He'd be at my side, and we'd participate in my Rotary meetings, meditation, the daybreak exercise classes with Susan, and the daybreak caregiver support group, which was invaluable because you could talk with other people who were going through the same thing. I met with my mother's group every Friday, and my whole extended family met with my 104-year-old aunt who was living in a facility. So socialize her because nobody could go in to see her.
Yeah.
So in many ways, we were kind of family gatherings that we couldn't have in regular day life. The last of Roy's Thanksgiving, our family all came here to the house for Thanksgiving, and Roy at this time was in a wheelchair and his speech was mostly garbled. But he could pick up that this was something we did as a family, and he was very happy and just seemed to be thriving on the energy of the family being around him. But in a few hours, he was in the ER and in the hospital after that. A couple days later, the palliative care doctor called us and said that Roy would never be better than he was at that point, and he'd get repeated infections and get worse. And did we want to consider palliative care? This is a little bit of a shock, but we thought about it for the weekend. And then that following Monday, we as a family decided to have hospice care here at home. My 3 sons who could live closer and their wives pulled together our dining room and converted it into a hospice final room for Roy. And the family, all my sons and their wives, were all able to participate in his care now that he was bedridden, because they could work on their computers, keep their jobs, and the children, the grandchildren worked on their Chromebooks. So we had a very unique situation where they could be totally in support of Roy and take care of him for the 9 months that he lived bedridden in that room. That room became the center of our universe. We just focused on him. And I think he stayed around a whole lot longer just because he knew the whole family was there and cared about him and he wasn't alone. And I think if it hadn't been for COVID, we wouldn't have been able to have such a unique experience. I certainly needed the support. It was really hard watching Roy lose parts of himself over time, and I felt the loss acutely, and I guess I still do. I can't say that I took very good care of myself throughout those 8 years. And I had a lot of catching up to do once he was gone. I learned that I could rise to the occasion and I could create a life for Roy that was as normal as possible for as long as possible. Grief can be triggered by a thought, a song, or something you just see. It doesn't go away, but you learn to live with it. I never thought it would be what it would be like if Roy were the first one to die. The first year after he was gone was a blur. Alone in the house can be lonely, and I had a lot that had to be done, a lot of deferred maintenance from over the years that I was caring for him. And I didn't really want to deal with it, but I got a certain amount done. I'm very aware of my having fewer years ahead than behind, and I feel an urgency to get things done and get things in order. But I would rather distract myself by getting out of the house, gardening, walking, spending time with family and friends. And I do those things, but I avoid the house and whatever needs to be done. The house is just filled with the memories of our life together, and I just kind of want to get out and do other things to avoid dealing with the pain of it. Once we, now me, I've always been a volunteer, and I suppose a caregiver. I believe in the Rotary motto of service above self, so I guess that's still who I am. I would say just to keep busy, expect the unexpected, find things you love to do. And I'm still struggling with this and want to make a plan for my future. And I'd like to work out a bucket list. I do think losing a spouse or someone you live with is different from losing someone outside your living space. My brother died unexpectedly a year ago, and it was a great loss, and I grieve him. But he lived someplace else, and I can sort of imagine that he's still alive, living in the place in Santa Cruz. It's like he's still there. Whereas when it's somebody that lives with you, your husband, your partner, they're with you all the time, and it's not so easy to let them go. Um, it's like you know that they're gone. You know they're gone all the time, even though you hold them close in your heart. They're a reminder in everything you do and see around you.
Oh, Pam, thank you so much. My goodness. Each of our caregivers, I so respect and love you so much that you are willing to share such a profound experience in your lives with us, and how it can reverberate out to people that are possibly facing this in their futures. Sarah, we're going to ask you to share with us next.
Sure. So I'm Sarah Nider, and I took care of my mom for about 4 or 5 years, and she died in the fall of 2022. And then part of the way through that, in 2019, I realized kind of like what Gail said or Pam said, where my husband was failing, his memory was failing, and I wasn't really paying attention. But I did, I retired, and then I realized, oh wow, I'm taking care of him too. So I did both of them until my mom passed away, and then my husband just died in May. So that was my experience of doing that, and it was hard. It was hard having both of them. It was hard grieving for my mom when my husband was so sick. Um, it was hard, and fortunately, I think for me now as a single person, as a widow, my husband and I always had very separate lives. We didn't always live together throughout our relationship, especially in the beginning for about the first 10, 12 years. We didn't live together. And then we did live together, but we weren't going to stay living together. And then we ended up staying living together. So we did live together for a long time, but we both maintained very separate lives. And I think, that was helpful for me because I already had relationships and friends and activities that I was doing already. But mainly between COVID and the intense caregiving that I did for the last year of his life, I really let go of a lot of the things that I did and that I knew how to do. And I realized as I was thinking about this afternoon, that one of the things that that was really helpful for me in getting after my husband died was that my daughters, I have two adult daughters that live close to me, and they never let me out of their sight. They were just like, they were on me the whole time. And we had structured times that we saw each other, and I had that with my friends as well. So I think having pre-scheduled things that were very repetitive was really good for me, because if I had to call up and say, hey, do you want to go for a walk, instead of knowing that Tuesday afternoon, oh yeah, that's the one Jeff and Paula and I go out for a walk, it would have been harder. I would have had a harder time with it, because nobody mentioned this yet, but I was absolutely overcome while he was still living with how much paperwork and organizing and arrangements were made in keeping someone alive who has multiple diseases. And to not have all that administrative work. I mean, I was doing, I'm sure we all did, hours and hours and hours a week of health insurance maintenance and stuff like that. And not having that was a huge, it was just like, I mean, it was just gone. One day it was just gone. I just wasn't doing any of it. And that was very unnerving in a way, because that had been like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm calling Blue Shield and I'm doing, calling this doctor and that doctor and, all of that. So I think that was, that having those few remnants of the structure that I had had in my own life was really helpful. So let's see. Also, the other thing that I had that was regular was my support group. I went twice a week, and for years, like Gail and Pam, we just, we glommed onto each other, and we stuck it out, Cleo, and we've been there for years, and it like Gail said, I mean, any of us could have said this, it was a lifesaver to have that support and the companionship, and not only the ideas that everybody throws around, but just like what Karen says, you say, God, I'm just so tired of this, and everybody goes, yeah, you're gonna do it again tomorrow, aren't you? And we all go, yeah, we are. We all know what the other one is going through, and I think that's been helpful. So let's see. Yeah, the thing that I put in the last part of it was that what I've really been struggling with is just with motivation. I mean, Pam, I said this to Pam and she said, yeah, right. Like sometimes it's just really hard for me to get off the sofa. I just want to sit on this. I just want to lay on the sofa and read my book. I don't want to go out. And so motivating myself has been very hard. And I think when I was thinking about it just now, I was thinking, well, why is that? And part of it has to do with when you're caregiving, you're gonna do it. Just fill in the blank, whatever it is, you're just gonna do it. There's not, you're not gonna fuss over it. You're just gonna get it done. And so now I'm having like everything feels like, oh, I have to do that. Everything feels like as a duty, even the fun stuff, even going to the museum, and it's like, oh, I got to make all these phone calls and so I think like all those years of having so much duty, like what I wanted to do it, and I would not have done it any other way. So I'm not complaining in that way, but I do have a residue at the now of feeling like every time I take care of myself, it's like, oh, I have to do that. Oh, I have to do that. I just want it to be easy. I want everything to be just like given to me on a platter. So I said that to a friend of mine the other day when we were for a walk, and I said, we were talking about, I was telling her about LaSalle finding a man on on Match. And I said, oh, I don't want to do that. I just want some wonderful woman to fall in love with me and just do everything for me. Do all the arrangements of falling in love for me. So I don't have to do anything. That's my main struggle is separating out, the things that I want to do and having the motivation to do it.
Yeah. And
I just have one more thing.
Please.
That I always say, you've all heard me say this a million times, but I don't know if there's anybody who hasn't heard this. Maybe I don't need to say it. But I think that once that the grieving really, for me, the grieving starts, and I've noticed this in our group, the grieving starts when you get that terminal diagnosis. That's when you start grieving. And when the person dying, that is a different kind of grieving, but it's not like you haven't been grieving the whole time. And it took me a long time. And so giving yourself permission to take that seriously as grieving, I think is part of what I came to feel. And I'm feeling like somebody said this. Just one more thing, I keep saying that.
Okay.
That I just now, just in the last few weeks, I've gotten to the place where I can say, I don't miss caregiving. I don't miss having a sick husband, but I do dearly miss my Ephraim. You know, I miss him. I don't miss any, I want him, you know, I don't miss him being sick and being, you know, he wasn't too miserable, but you know, he was sick and I don't miss that, but I do miss him. So that took me a long time to get to that place. So that's it.
Well, that's an excellent point you just brought up, Sarah. That, and I remember you saying while you were in the caregiving mode that you were a married widow.
Yes. Right.
And I think that deserves to be brought up too, that the caregiving itself, such a good point that you're in the grieving process while your loved one is alive, because they are becoming someone else. They are becoming a different version of themselves that you may or may not be able to connect with.
Mhm.
And to lay grieving to simply when your loved one dies, you're missing a lot of it, honoring of your experience of being in grief as your loved one is declining. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's really excellent. We're going to move on to LaSalle. Before we do, I wanted to acknowledge, really acknowledge and thank our caregivers for sharing at such a deep level. I think everybody that is a caregiver needs to hear this, that the struggles are real, the challenges are real. There's a certain release when your loved one dies, but then you're only released from having to care for them and them declining. As you all have said, you really miss the person that has been your partner and your loved one for so long. That's what you have to get back to a bit. Very, very good. LaSalle, we're going to move to you.
Okay. I'm so touched by what everyone has said so far. I just have to say that. Um, my name is LaSalle, and I want to share my journey of caregiving and grieving with you. 4 years ago, my husband John, who was the love of my life for 36 years, was suddenly diagnosed with severe glaucoma. Then about a year later, he was diagnosed with pure autonomic failure, a rare degenerative disorder of the nervous system, causing a gradual breakdown of his bodily systems. Once a skilled woodworker, a voracious reader, master gardener, my husband was now blind, frail, dizzy, chronically exhausted, and mostly bedridden. For 3 years, I was his caregiver as I witnessed him diminish in both physical health and in quality of life. He died 8 months ago. Today, I'm eager to start the next chapter, but I'm still so tired most days, and sometimes my brain doesn't work very well. I realize I can't skirt around the grieving process. I must go through it and honor it if I'm to heal. Of course, everyone grieves in their own way. That said, I thought I would share some excerpts from my journals since my husband died to show you how grief can feel like an emotional roller coaster. Here's an excerpt from the first week after John died. I realize I've been in a very special, very temporary place right now, being love bombed by friends and family, not expected to do anything, just given all the time I need to process and heal. Friends send flowers, take me out to dinner and on gentle walks. I'm in a bubble of compassion. Just being in the moment is plenty. September 13th. I don't feel a burning need to be around people, however well-meaning. Just need to be in my skin and feel the feels. Death can be an act of mercy and freedom from pain and misery, but it's also a trauma for those of us left behind. October 4th. I totally underestimated how much my energy is affected by John's death. There's a tenderness in my heart that makes me want to cocoon until I'm ready to be back out in the world. And clearly I'm just not ready. I need to listen to my body and honor that tenderness. It will take time to heal. October 30th. Had this vision lying in bed that everyone who loves me was in a big circle holding a gigantic blanket in their hands. I'm in the middle of the blanket and they throw me up in the air and they yell, "We love you," over and over. It makes me feel so good. And right now I realize I need to hear that I'm loved. My mind has not been up to dealing with the long list of all the financial, legal, and administrative tasks related to John's death. I've been very forgetful, sometimes almost spastic in my thinking these days. I Google grieving, am I going crazy? And I learned that widow's brain and brain fog is real and often a normal part of the grieving process. November 25th. Not there yet, but I'm starting to see little faint lights through the brain fog, and that gives me hope. The other night I wrote down, I have an urge to re-inhabit my life. November 26th. Monday, I joined back into my support group and was so warmly welcomed. I had thought that after John died that I was on the other side of that group, but I realized I still had a broken heart that needed to be healed, and I could still support other caregivers. I've now re-embraced this group as a fundamental part of my healing. December 8th. I'm just going through the mysterious journey of grieving. Turns out it's unpredictable, non-linear, murky, disarming, and soul-penetrating. It seems the more I fight it, the more it knocks on the door. Its form feels like a heavy yoke on my shoulders, weighing me down. There's a good reason for grief. It honors John's life and the love we shared, and it helps me molt into the next life chapter. December 20th. Throughout the grief process, I start to realize I'm still caregiving, but I'm now caregiving myself. The most important thing you can do in mourning is to be really, really kind to yourself, to remember your worth as a human being. January 6th. Okay, I got my mojo back. It's not only a tectonic shift in my emotions, my spirit, my mental state. I swear it's molecular. It feels like my molecules are talking to each other again, like my nervous system is lubricated again. My confidence and judgment are back. My clarity of thinking is back. I'm able to sit alone with myself, be here now, and be serene and grateful and full of possibilities. February 21st. Wake up feeling wretched. I'm living a pathetic half-life since John got sick and died. I was hanging out with 3 happy couples for 4 days, and it was really hard. Somehow it brought into sharp relief my lonely widowhood. February 24th. It's as if you were to slice open a piece of well-cooked meat, all dark and crispy on the outside, and discover that it's still pink and raw on the inside. I thought I was over the hump of grieving. It's been almost 6 months, but my vulnerability is still very pink and raw. March 3rd. I seem to have a habit of crying every morning, not heaving sobs, but feelings that lead to a grimace and tears then roll down my cheeks. I'm crying not so much because John is dead and I miss him, which goes without saying, but because the last 3 years have been so damn hard and I don't know where I'm going. The tears help me heal. They give me permission to admit the trauma and hardship of the last several years. And each time I cry, I feel like I'm getting somewhere, moving forward, working my way through. And finally, April 8th, my first real vacation in a very long time. We're out on the Kona coast, and one of my friends has put together a little Buddhist ceremony in honor of John. As we approached the chosen site, we were awed by a fat double rainbow stretched over the ocean, and then a pod of joyous spinner dolphins who take turns jumping up out of the ocean and spinning in the air. I know it sounds like a Disney movie, but to me it was clear that John's spirit was with us. Without any words spoken, he was saying to me, our spirits are connected, I'm happy and I'm safe, and I want you to be happy and safe too. Up until then, I hadn't seen any signs of John. What a healing gift I got. Thank you.
Whoa, thank you, LaSalle. Thank you. The eloquence of each of you is so moving and so incredibly impacting. And your willingness, as I said earlier, to share at such a deep and raw level, it's a gift that you'll never know how many people you will touch and have touched through your sharing. I wanted to mention that all of our presenters were part of our care group and have decided to stay on. And I think that that gives us a new chapter in our caregiving experience, to be able to have the senior members of our group that can come back and say, hey, there's life after caregiving. And sometimes it's rocky and sometimes it's sublime, but it's always real. And I tend to think that so often support groups, my suspicion is that once you're no longer a caregiver, off you go, you know, have a nice life. Be sure and join a grief group if you find one, instead of realizing that the grieving is, as you so eloquently said earlier, the grieving starts the minute the diagnosis happens. So it's a continuity and a gift that you give us by coming back and saying, hey, we have built a very deep, very caring, and very loving community. And we care for each other. We care for each other deeply. And the way that we can experience and express it is to be the senior members that are paving the way about how it's going to be and how it's not going to be, and all the measurements in between of what it's like when your loved one passes. And you know, each one of you has had a different experience and a different share, but yet so many similarities, so many shares interface with one another. There's something special about, well, you know, certainly I feel very strongly this way. There's something very special about a support group where you're invited to be and to come as you are. You know, how wonderful when you're invited to a party, come as you are. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to put on makeup. Just come with your real, raw, total self, and we will embrace you and we'll get it, because we can identify with it on some level ourselves. And so I feel deeply honored that you caregivers that are continuing in our group, gosh, it's so nice to have you. And Pam, it's lovely when you come back and join us too, even though you lost Roy 4 years ago, it's still salient. There's still other layers to look at. There's still other layers to share that we can all benefit from. And so I feel deeply honored to be a part of your lives and your courage and your willingness is so enriching. You will never know how many people you will touch as this webinar is viewed in the future. So I thank you all. And I wanted to open it up a bit to the folks who have joined us to share your thoughts, insights, questions, and so forth. So we'd like to hear from you. Cleo.
I just want to say thank you because I took care of my mom. And when I was taking care of her for 12 years, I didn't know about Daybreak. And it was after she had passed that I saw the the leaflet or whatever, the advertisement for Daybreak caregivers in the senior center. And I just want to thank all you ladies for sharing your story because I know if it wasn't for me being able to be part of being with the Daybreakers caregiving group, maybe I might have lost my mind because I was heading down that road because you always think after they're gone too, did I do the best I could? Did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh or too soft? Or, you just kind of start um, interrogating yourself.
Yeah.
And I just wanted you to know that thank you, Susan and Karen and Daybreak. I really appreciate you and all the people I've met. What I can say, what makes the difference to me continuing to be with you is because I've learned so much. I didn't know I needed legal papers for this and should have something written for Darlene. I didn't know I should pay my insurance and my cremation and all that before
Mhm.
it's just without talking to people and sharing your story, you really don't know what to do. So thank you for all your help. I really appreciate you.
Oh, and we appreciate you, Cleo. You are our senior member because your mother had long ago passed when you joined us. And you have been a faithful, continuous member of our support group. We learn so much from you. We learn from your wisdom and your insight. And it just, I can't emphasize enough how important the continuity is that, and if you choose, Gail has chosen to move on from the support group. She'll come back and visit us from time to time because we're her community. But there's it's like a parent. There's permission for you to go, but there's a lot of embracing of you to stay as well. Odd analogy, but I guess it works. But the point being that we build a community of trust, of spontaneity, of uh, transparency, of non-judgment. If you're slipping, we're going to give you a hand up. If you're having a bad day, go for it. Tell us. We at the end of the support groups, we have something called a bookmark. If you want to talk about it further, there's space for you to do that. But the common denominator is that when you're accepted unconditionally and people can identify with what you're going through, there's permission for you to move through whatever you need to move through to enhance the quality of your lives. So I'd like to hear from more folks in the studio audience.
Mhm.
Let's see. Okay, if you don't volunteer, I'm going to call on you. Lisa,
I knew this was gonna
we'd
happen.
love to hear from you.
It is so great to see everyone. I'm one that weaves in and out of the group. Shantae, thank you so much for the text message. I was actually in Castro Valley and I raced down 580 to get home to get on the call.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Gail is the instrument that brought me to the group. We met in Safeway and she
Yeah,
gave me the
that's
phone number
right.
and she says, just try it, you'll like it.
Ha.
And Both my parents are gone now, 7 months and 5 days apart,
Oh,
and
my
I'm still standing.
condolences.
I miss everyone, but I'm just overwhelmed. And I'm still in the raw stage of trying to be the good daughter and make sure that everything is executed as
Mhm.
my parents would want it to be. I've gone back to work sporadically, lots of triggers, but I'm out there. I find comfort in talking with people with common journeys. And for me, that's on an airplane because the acceptance, like you said, Karen, is unconditional. It's no repeat action, it's no repeat conversation. And if we become friends, we exchange numbers and we text. I find just like when I went through my first divorce, I felt like I was all by myself. But once I joined a support group, I found out there's more divorced people than there are happily married people. So you have to take that step forward in order to, I feel like an orphan. That's part of the grieving process. So I'm in the orphan category now
Yes.
and really trying to figure out my life without my parents. I was very devoted and caregave for both of them, gave up my home and moved across the street, and I was there on a daily basis. I feel very good about being there for both of them. I have a hole in my heart, but I know that my work's not over and that groups like this, where I can come back and listen to the wise wisdom, is a thing that I truly treasure.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
what I got.
And we treasure you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an amazing thing to be able to be with people that you may never meet on the street, and yet all of a sudden we've built this common ground that is deeply trusted. You know, we trust each other. And it's just, yeah, it's so amazing. I'd like to hear from any of our other visitors. Shantae?
Um, I don't really have anything to add at this time. I get a little emotional listening to Lisa. And she had to remind me after I sent her the invitation because I just forgot just that quick. So pray for me as far as the webinar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's good to hear everybody share and see that everybody's in different stages and different places. And deal with grief in different ways. I don't know what mine will look like.
Yeah.
Not to that point yet. And I often say, who knows? I may go before him. So we don't know how this is all going to play out, But thank you, everybody, for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Shantae. I think what we tend to focus on again and again, and I think we can speak to our four presenters, caregiver presenters today, is to live the kind of life as a caregiver, as a lover, as a partner, loved one, that you don't have regrets. Because I think that's the thing that we tend to dredge up afterwards. I should have, could have, would have. And I think being assured and being received by fellow caregivers and saying to you, you've done so much, just thank you for sharing yourselves and your experiences and journeys with us.
I do think it's natural to kind of second guess yourself and think back, did I do the right thing? Did I, but the reality is you did the best you could when you did what you did, and you worked hard to make people, our partner live the best life possible. And you have to just go with that. There's one thing that Roy said to me, and it stuck with me. He said that when he used to take his long walks, he used to talk to his father, who had died many years before. He'd have these conversations in his head with his father and talk about computers and the courses he was taking and just share as though he were alive. And I always remember that, and I find myself doing the same thing. And it's very comforting to kind of have this little conversation with him, knowing he would understand what I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you strike on such an important point, Pam, that regardless of what you did or didn't do as a caregiver, you need to reassure yourselves you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. You know, forgive yourselves for the times when you said, don't you remember? And why did you do that? And can't you just forgive ourselves for that, because we didn't know. We didn't know. Nobody gave us a handbook and said, here, this is what you do. You didn't know. And I think self-forgiveness has a lot to do with remembering you did the best you could with what you knew. And when you knew better, you did better. And if we can go through our lives with that, regardless of our station in life, that is the truth. And certainly in terms of caregiving, the challenges that are met daily, nobody knows what you've been through. Your friends can drive in and drive out and say howdy and so forth. They aren't 24/7 with their loved ones. So it's a unique experience shared by people who get it.
And no one can really understand it unless they've been through it.
And no one can understand unless they've been through it. That is for sure. Well, I want to thank, Susan, I'm glad you joined us. Please share.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. You can't know. And really, who could bear to know until it is what you have to face? And yeah, I really see how wonderful it is to be able to support each other and love each other. So thank you all for being part of a healing process for yourselves and each other.
So true. So thank you. Yes. And you know, it's good we can't look into the future. You know, one day at a time has meaning. If you knew what you were facing, it wouldn't have made it any easier for you to go through it. Yeah, so that's the truth for sure. Okay, well, any last thoughts?
Live in the moment.
Oh, amen. Live in the moment. Boy, tattoo that on the inside of our skulls and brains. It's so true. And you know, there's one of the things that I really celebrate and appreciate is being with all of you caregivers over the years and see the personal growth that you have experienced by having, you know, you were talking about, Sarah, you were talking about, I don't have to, you know, and want to lay on the couch and read a good book. Yeah, you know, you had years of have tos. You had years of I can't ignore the dirty sheets or the thises and the that's that you had to care for. You had a whole bunch of have tos. It's healthy to go and say, I'm going to read a book today. And I don't have to.
You don't have to feel guilty about it.
You don't have to feel guilty about it. In fact, celebrate the fact that you're doing it. Sarah.
Well, I have to say that I did give myself permission to stay on the sofa and continue to, but also I'm feeling a little bored and a little grumpy, like one of those little kids, you know, where I'm bored. You know?
Nature's way of
I
saying
think
it's
that-
time to move.
And I think that means that it's about time for me to, start moving on. So that, I think
Exactly.
it's a good sign.
Trust the self-regulating device inside, right?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. My goodness, your courage, your willingness, just it's I'm speechless. Not an often thing for me. So anyway, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all real soon too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.